now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back. My next guest is the president of the Catholic League. Tonight he dons his sociologist hat to help us unpack the results of a new survey he and the League have commissioned. It measures Catholic attitudes and beliefs before the papal visit. Here to tell us what he found, please welcome via satellite from Manhattan, Dr. Bill Donohue. Bill, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you for having me.
What was the most surprising thing, if you stand back and look at this survey? What surprised you the most as you read through the data?
Well, I think certainly the most important thing, and it may be surprising to some people, and that is how loyal practicing Catholics are. And even Catholics who are non-practicing pretty much agree with the Church on so many different important issues, and certainly Jesus and the resurrection mean a great deal to them. And Catholics regard their religion as a significant aspect. About 90% or more believe that their teachings and the Catholic Church means so much to them in their daily lives that I think that's a lot rosier picture than is often provided by the media.
Bill, I want to show you, put up for the audience and for you, some of these findings. Now, this is a Pew Poll. In it, it found that 46% of Catholics say the Church should recognize the marriages of gay and lesbian people. In your survey, 58% support the traditional teaching of the Church vis-a-vis marriage. Why that discrepancy? What's happening there?
I think a lot of times it has to do with the wording. I mean, just take the question of, if the question is posed, is gay marriage the equal of cohabitation and marriage between a man and a woman? That's one thing. Another thing is, are you okay with or do you disapprove of same-sex marriage? Some of that gets teased into there as well. A lot of it's the wording. I know if you were to ask about abortion and you emphasize, should a woman have the right to do what she wants with her own body, you get one answer. If you ask, does a woman have a right to take the life of another person inside of her own body, or you talk about, are there double rights there, another person's right, you get a different kind of response. I think that the problem I had with the Pew survey was not its methodological precision. They do excellent work. I'm just wondering why it's okay to talk about practicing and non-practicing Catholics. We do that ourselves in our survey.
Right.
But why do you bring in cultural Catholics? Why do you bring in ex-Catholics? Why do you bring in people who say, well, I'm connected to Catholics? I mean, why the elasticity in this term Catholic to encompass almost everything? We don't do that with any other segment of the population. So it's kind of curious poll.
Bill, you also looked in your survey into women priests. What were the findings, and doesn't it show that these people, Catholic people, are somewhat conflicted on these issues?
It does, and let me address that because I get this, I talked to a reporter about this yesterday. If you say to Catholics, you say to anybody, non-Catholics, are you okay with so-and-so? Catholics and non-Catholics alike, they don't want to be perceived as being too judgmental. Now, there's a profound difference between saying, would you be okay if the Catholic Church had women priests? Most Catholics will say, yeah, I'm okay with it. In other words, I'm not going to lose my religion as a result of it. Now, let me tell you something. There's a huge difference between a preference and a demand. How many Catholics are demanding that the Church ordain women? Almost none. And what's the evidence for that? Well, they would have bolted a long time ago, wouldn't they? They would have joined the mainline Protestant denominations because they have women priests. They're not exactly doing too well, by the way. Those numbers are going south there. Yeah. In other words, to say, yeah, are you okay with women priests? Are you okay with this or that? That's one thing. To say that you are suffering angst, that you're going to get involved in a petition, that you're demanding this, that the Church is teetering unless they give in to these teachings. See, this is the way the media will willfully distort it. We found that only 35% of Catholics said that they felt strongly that women should be priests. That means 2 out of 3 Catholics are either okay with women not being priests, or it doesn't mean that much to them. Now, about in terms of being conflicted, yes, I had a hand in writing that question 20 years ago, and again in this poll here, lots of people are conflicted about lots of things. Those same people who say, are you okay with women priests, 58%, are among the 52% who say, I think the Catholic Church should stick to its founding principles and teachings and not try to keep up with the customs of today. So there's a certain kind of tension there. Okay, maybe woman priest, that's okay. But as far as I'm concerned, one of the things I like about my religion is it doesn't change with the cultural winds. So is there a conflict there? There is. But you know what? That's what we try to get to in our poll, to show the nuance, which sometimes is missing from other surveys.
There is an interesting thing in the Catholic League poll. You found overall the Pope Francis enjoys an 83% job approval rating among Catholics, which is darn good. Any politician would kill for that. However, the Gallup poll indicated that his approval might be slipping. Overall, 76% to 59%, and among Catholics from 89% to 71%. To what do you attribute that decline, Bill, in the Pope's popularity?
I would say that, one of the nice things about the Pope is that he's a man of authenticity and he's courageous and he's breaking new grounds. But that's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because now you go into uncharted waters from time to time, and you create a sense of uncertainty. And I think there's not only a sense of uncertainty with the Pope, but I think there's also a question of how micro are you going to get? Take the environment. Pope Benedict XVI, Pope John Paul II, all the popes before them, they talk about Catholics, Christians in general, have to be God's stewards. We have a moral obligation to care for the environment. But when you get into the weeds, when you get very micro-analyzing, and you begin to get into fossil fuels and air conditioning and things of that nature, I think a number of people are saying, wait a minute, now that's a little bit outside the domain. Same thing with income inequality and the like. I think some people say, sure, income inequality is a fact of life in every society. Some of it's just, some of it's unjust. And when you begin to take the model of the economy in Latin America, and you use that as prototypical of a market economy, a lot of people, certainly myself included, would say, no, that's a false comparison. Because what you have in Latin America is basically crony capitalism, which is state-directed, which is fundamentally different from a market economy. So I think there have been some stumbling here. I'm sure that the Pope's motives are beyond rebuke. But the question is, I think some people are beginning to look askance when you get into some of these uncharted waters with that level of specificity.
There's an interesting fact that you all gleaned from your survey. It found that 1/3 of respondents, 1/3, say Pope Francis's views on climate change and income inequality carry more weight than those on abortion and marriage. Did that surprise you? A full third?
Well, don't forget, that's the aggregate. That's blending practicing with non-practicing. And one thing we find out in our poll, which is true of all polls, and it's certainly true in the Pew survey, mass attendance as an indicator of a practicing Catholic. People who attend Mass regularly, who are practicing Catholics, they are not in rebellion against the Church's teachings. It's the ones who are non-practicing. So when you conflate the non-practicing together, I mean, and that raises a serious question. If your Catholic identity, it basically is an example of what is explained by your attendance at Easter and Christmas Mass and occasional prayer, to what extent can they be considered bona fide Catholics when you compare them to practicing Catholics? So again, you really have to disaggregate that. That's where you'd see the difference. And by the way, every time we take a look at the non-practicing versus the practicing, there's a huge difference. The non-practicing Catholics have more in common with secularists than they do with their own fellow Catholics who attend Mass regularly.
Bill, I want to get your reaction to a few stories here. I've got to throw these at you before I let you go. What do you make of Vice President Joe Biden, who himself may be considering a presidential run? He said this week, Pope Francis has become a moral rudder for the world on some of the most important issues of our time, from inequality to climate change. Do you think the administration may be attempting to use the Pope politically during his visit here?
Let me answer that definitively. The answer is unquestionably yes. And let me just take it beyond that. 84 Democrats, led by Rosa DeLauro, a Catholic, non-practicing, I would think, in many respects, out of Connecticut. This woman, who's been in rebellion against the bishops, who have led the fight against the bishops, she has got 84 people, not all of whom are Catholic, by the way, which I find striking, lobbying the Pope now on what he has to say when he gets to Washington. And they're not talking about the poor. Right. They're getting very specific. They want him to address minimum wage and the like. Now, every one of these people are rabid pro-abortion Catholics and non-Catholics. Since when did they exercise such tremendous fidelity to the church's teachings? I mean, the selectiveness and the hypocrisy of these people, these 84 Democrats, which we will address in the Catholic League tomorrow, is mind-boggling. When it comes to euthanasia, when it comes to embryonic stem cell research, when it comes to abortion, when it comes to marriage, these central issues of our day, they're all on the other side. They reject the Catholic Church, and in the case of Delora, have led the rebellion against the bishop. So I guess these people, the only word I can use that comes to mind is that they are utterly shameless.
Before I let you go, your reaction to this clerk in Kentucky who refused to issue marriage licenses of any kind since the Supreme Court decision was handed down on gay marriage. She has now been jailed by the court. Was the court right? Should this woman have just followed her job description and signed off on these things, regardless of her moral concerns with it or religious oppositions?
Well, the authorities have an obligation, a legal obligation to enforce the law. That is the law. On the other hand, she was right to do what she did. In other words, she's protesting, saying that I have a First Amendment freedom of conscience right, and I'm not going to cooperate with you. Now, I understand the authorities. They can't just be in rebellion against the Supreme Court justices here. What I want to know is why are there so many Catholic priests as well and others now who are not taking the position of this woman who's invoking conscience rights? You know, I served during the Vietnam War period. And I remember back then when they questioned this in the Supreme Court, you know, do you have to have religious convictions in order not to serve? And the answer was no. They could be morally grounded. They could be non-sectarian. If that's the case when it comes to the draft, and that's okay with me, why is it that a practicing Christian now is not getting the support that she deserves from practicing Christians in this country? I find it immoral.
Bill Donohue, thanks for always weighing in, and for the survey. We will be in touch with you in the days ahead. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you.
You can check out the survey and much more by visiting CatholicLeague.org.